Number 10. Machete Rampage. A woman thought she was going to die when her jealous boyfriend flew into a rage and stabbed her in the back with a machete. 21-year-old Chelsea Morris from Cheshire in England had been dating Ryan Abbott, 28, for almost 4 years when the attack happened in March of 2020. Chelsea went out to dinner to celebrate her new job, and while she was doing that, Ryan decided to get messed up on drugs. By the time Chelsea got home, Ryan was completely out of his mind. He became angry that she had gone out without him. Ryan had jealousy issues, and these issues were exacerbated when he took illegal street drugs. Things only got worse when he picked up the machete, stabbed Chelsea in the back with it, and then tried to hit her in the head with the weapon. The only reason Chelsea didn't take the machete blade to her face was that she blocked it with her arm. Ryan then kept Chelsea as a hostage for a brief time. After a while, the drugs distracted him, and he ran out of the house and took his rampage to the neighbors. Half naked, Ryan broke people's doors down, smashed car windows, and caused nearly $2,500 worth of damage. When he appeared in court in June of 2020, he was ordered to serve 4 years in prison for the machete attack and the criminal property damage. Number 9. Georgia Ambush. A man in Georgia had his girlfriend lure his ex-girlfriend into a fight so that he could kill her. Police say on May 25, 2022, Deshawn McCrary drove to the Camelot condominiums in South Fulton to meet with her ex-boyfriend's girlfriend. Her ex-boyfriend, Colvin Lindsay, had supposedly facilitated a fight between Deja and his current girlfriend at the time, Tiandra Brox. But the very second Deja McCrary got out of the car at the meeting place, she was shot and killed. Deja had not driven to the meeting spot alone either. She had taken her 4-year-old child with her, and the kid was inside the car as their mother was shot and killed. Deja had driven across town with her infant to get into a fist fight in a parking lot with her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. The child wasn't wounded, but did suffer minor scratches. The ex-boyfriend was arrested 5 days later and charged with murder, along with possession of a firearm and being associated with a street gang. The other woman involved was arrested and charged as well with murder, and so was a third woman named Barnes, who had been involved in the scheme. Number 8. Marriage Refusal Beheading. The son of a wealthy industrialist was recently sentenced to death for beheading his girlfriend. His name is Zahir Jaffer, 30 years old and living in Pakistan. He's a Pakistani-American who was dating the daughter of a former ambassador to South Korea. Her name was Noor Muqaddam, 27. The pair had been dating for some time, but then things started to go wrong. It's unclear what exactly happened, but Noor appears to have broken off the relationship. He then decided that he was going to ask her to marry him, and that if she said no, he was going to kill her. On July 20th, 2021, Zahir tricked Noor into traveling to his mansion in Islamabad. He asked if she would marry him, she refused, and then he got violent. But before the murder, Noor managed to escape. She climbed out of a window, was running across the property to try and get away, and then was captured by 2 of Zahir's servants. She was dragged back into the house, delivered to Zahir, and then tortured. He kept her hostage in his mansion for 2 days, beat her with brass knuckles, then finally decapitated her. Following the brutal murder, Zahir was apprehended by the police and sentenced to death. He was also given 25 years of imprisonment, although he'll be hanged first. His security guard and gardener, the 2 that dragged Noor back into the house, were each given 10 years in prison. Number 7. RV Park Rampage. In 2006, a disgruntled ex-boyfriend broke into a gated RV park early in the morning on a Thursday, killed the security guard on duty, then murdered the guy trying to defend his former girlfriend. It all started when Dario Grasso tried to end her relationship with the gunman, Sean Creamer of Titusville. She made it very clear that their relationship was over, that she was never getting back together with him, and that he needed to leave her alone. She was so fearful for her own safety that she went and got an injunction order against Sean, meaning he was not legally allowed to go anywhere near her. Unfortunately for everyone involved, Sean Creamer did not care about the injunction order. The same night that the restraining order was placed against him, he got drunk, drove down to the great outdoors RV park and golf resort, parked in a nearby restaurant, and walked half a mile to the entrance. When he was confronted by the security guard on duty, an innocent man named Daniel Tripp, Sean pulled out his gun and killed him. Sean then walked across the RV park to the home he and his ex-girlfriend had previously been sharing. She had suspected something like this might happen, and so Dario had sent her young daughter to the home of a nearby friend for the night. She had also asked one of her personal friends, a man named David Hinkle, if he could spend the night at her house. She was hoping David might be able to protect her in case Sean showed up. When Sean showed up at the house, he immediately shot and killed David Hinkle. He went to kill Dario too, but she managed to squeeze her way out of a window and escape without being hurt. Her ex-boyfriend then died in an altercation that followed with the police by a gunshot wound to his head. Number 6. Taking the kids to church. Anders Odegaard murdered his ex-wife, Carissa, following a dispute over who would take their kids to church. He did it in front of their young children with his bare fists, traumatizing his own children and leaving his ex-wife to bleed out on the floor. Following the initial altercation, 2 of the kids escaped, ran into the street, and flagged a man down. They then asked him to phone the police because their mother was bleeding and needed help. When the deputies arrived at the house in Warren, Minnesota, they discovered Carissa Odegaard horribly beaten and her ex-boyfriend Anders wearing only his boxer shorts and covered in blood. Carissa was taken immediately to the hospital, but there wasn't anything doctors could do. Carissa was killed on August 23, 2022. Before the killing, Anders was considered a respectable member of the community, or at least an attempted respectable member of the community. He had recently been made the county prosecutor of Mercer County in North Dakota, only to be fired 3 months later. He then took a job as a public defender, but was let go from that position too. Anders was apparently in debt of around $100,000. Then, to add to his troubles, Carissa served him with divorce papers in 2021. The spiral ended with his ex-wife's murder, and all because she was trying to take her children to church. It was Carissa's time to have the kids, but Anders didn't want to give them back. So he committed second-degree murder. Now, he'll likely never see his children again. Number 5. Murder in a parking lot. A Colorado teenager was beaten to death in a parking lot by her 20-year-old ex-boyfriend in 2021. Her name was Danielle Hopton, 18 years old, from Fort Collins. Danielle was about as good of a person as you can get, someone who volunteered at an animal shelter in her spare time. One of the things she really enjoyed doing was helping to raise guide dog puppies for the blind. But on February 6th, shortly after she graduated high school, her ex-boyfriend ambushed her in a parking lot and bludgeoned her to death. She was discovered lying in a pool of blood on the pavement and was quickly taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, her injuries were too severe, and there was nothing doctors could do to save her. Detectives soon identified 20-year-old Stephen McNeil as their prime suspect. In fact, they caught and arrested him just hours after the deadly assault. The couple had been in a relationship that turned sour, so sour Danielle had gotten a restraining order against Stephen. Stephen was also a known violent offender. He had been arrested in December the year before on felony assault when he strangled somebody. He was then arrested the next month for criminal mischief. His bad attitude and aggressive behavior culminated in the barbaric slaughter of an innocent woman in a parking lot in the middle of the afternoon. Stephen is now being charged with first-degree murder. Number 4. Fleeing to Mexico. A Texas mom was discovered dead in her vehicle in early October of 2022. The man who murdered her was discovered shortly after in another country. Daniel Chacon first kidnapped his 38-year-old ex-girlfriend Mayra Gutierrez at gunpoint, then executed her in her own vehicle. He then drove across the border into Nuevo Laredo in Mexico. But it all started with an ordinary visit. Mayra had gone to the Red Pines apartment complex in Pasadena to visit the child she and Daniel shared. But something had gone wrong in Daniel's mind. When his ex-girlfriend showed up, he threatened her with a gun in front of eyewitnesses, forced her back into her silver SUV, and climbed in after her. He then made her drive to Houston, where he shot her and left her dead in the driver's seat. It was a terrible tragedy, and one that could have been prevented. Daniel showed up at his uncle's house the day before the murder and admitted what he was going to do. Daniel said he was going to kill his ex, and his uncle had reported that to the Pasadena police. But the police didn't do anything, and Myra was murdered the next day. Daniel also has a history of violence against women, with arrests dating back to 2012. Number 3. Terror at UHaul. Asia Johnson was only 20 years old when she lost her life in the summer of 2022. She was pushing her baby in a stroller down a New York City street at about 8:20 p.m. when it happened. She never even saw it coming. The young mother was walking, minding her own business, going about her day as she would any other. Then she took a bullet at point-blank range to her head. The man who killed her is 22-year-old Isaac Agro, the father of the baby in the stroller. He was an angry ex-boyfriend who couldn't stand the fact that Asia could live her life without him. The baby was only 3 months old. Asia and Isaac had been in a brief relationship that resulted in the birth of a baby. However, Asia terminated that relationship on account of Isaac was not exactly father material. However, Isaac continually tried to get back together. He was desperate, but nothing he did seemed to work. Finally, he resorted to violence. Isaac persuaded Asia to meet him by promising he had some items for their young daughter. In reality, he was planning to kill her. When he spotted Asia in the street, he rushed up, pressed a gun against her head, and pulled the trigger. He then left his 3-month-old daughter in the stroller and ran away. Number 2. Octavius Rogers. Octavius Rogers was arrested in Memphis, Tennessee, after he showed up at his ex-girlfriend's house with an AK-47 style rifle. It happened in spring of 2022. He stood outside his ex-girlfriend's house and fired his rifle in the air, then blasted out her windows with it. Shards of glass were strewn across the walkway. Neighbors ran into their houses and got down on the ground, and Octavius took off in his truck. This all started because of drama between Octavius, his ex-girlfriend, and her new boyfriend. Octavius was feeling jaded and betrayed, and so he took his anger out on everyone he felt was against him. He first attacked his ex-girlfriend, only to be thwarted by her 8-year-old son, whom he choked out. He then drove to the new boyfriend's house and shot it up, shooting the boyfriend in the leg with a bullet. And finally, he drove to his ex-girlfriend's house and shot that one up too. He has since been arrested for attempted murder and 5 counts of aggravated assault, as well as child abuse. Neighbors say they're glad he's behind bars, where he can get the help he desperately needs. Number 1. Heavy sleeper. In the city of Decatur, Georgia, a woman's boyfriend slept through a vicious attack launched by her ex-boyfriend. This guy must be an extremely heavy sleeper, because on January 22nd, 2022, the ex-boyfriend broke into the house in the middle of the night and attacked both his ex-girlfriend and the slumbering boyfriend. The sleeping boyfriend didn't wake up until he was stomped on. Local police believe the ex-boyfriend had likely been staking out the building. The 36-year-old unidentified female and her new partner returned from an evening out at roughly 1:40 a.m. That was when the ex crept up the stairs of their apartment building, walked right into their apartment, went upstairs to the bedroom, and began his vicious assault. The new boyfriend was clueless and asleep until the ex started stomping on his head. After that, he woke up in a real hurry. But unfortunately, he wasn't in the best position to fight, seeing as he was half asleep and already being stepped on. He took a horrible beating. The woman was pushed down the stairs, and the ex-boyfriend took off with both their cell phones. He was arrested about 2 weeks later and charged with home invasion. Number 10. Deshawn Presley. Deshawn Presley was shopping at a Kroger supermarket in Ohio with his 1-year-old daughter in 2021 when he crossed paths with 87-year-old Pat Goins. They engaged in a brief but pleasant chat before parting ways, and they both continued on with their shopping. However, moments later, Presley heard Goins scream, "My purse." He sprang into action without a second thought and chased down a thief who had grabbed the elderly woman's purse out of her cart. Thanks to Presley's quick response, he managed to stop the suspect before he was able to get into his car and drive away. Over a dozen other shoppers joined him in his efforts to apprehend the culprit, who police later identified as 58-year-old Derek Vaughan. Presley held Vaughan to the ground until police arrived. In the meantime, fellow shoppers who had stepped in to help ordered Vaughan to apologize to Goins. He did, and he was soon taken into custody on suspicion of felony theft and robbery. Butler County Sheriff Richard Jones recognized Presley's heroic actions by giving him the Citizens Award. Goins attended the ceremony and told Fox 11, "I'm glad that he received this honor because he's my hero." She and Presley became fast friends and made plans to catch up over dinner in the near future. Vaughan ended up pleading guilty to one count of theft, but it's unclear what his sentencing was. Number 9. Jenna Malone. While driving through Hollywood in April of 2022, actress Jenna Malone noticed a man kicking and choking a small dog. She yelled for him to stop out of her car window, but the suspect ignored her commands. Malone then got out of the vehicle and chased after the alleged animal abuser while signaling to a bystander to help her. 6 men soon joined the pursuit on foot and apprehended the suspect, at which point Malone retrieved her car and drove to the scene. Shocking footage shows the group of men beating and subduing the suspect while telling him that they were making a citizen's arrest. They held him down on the ground until police arrived. When asked about his treatment toward the dog, the man allegedly said that it was his mom's pet and that he was hitting the animal for disobeying him. In the meantime, Malone watched over the injured dog, a 6-year-old Maltipoo named Champion. In a tweet, she described the animal as filthy, like he hadn't been taken care of in months. Police charged the suspect with felony animal abuse, but declined to specify whether any of the men who made the citizen's arrest were charged as well. In the meantime, Champion was taken to an animal hospital where he received treatment for multiple broken bones. The dog's owner, Kelly McKinney, told the Washington Post that her son stole Champion from her, who was the man arrested in the case. A few weeks prior to the incident, McKinney had left her beloved canine in her brother's care while she went grocery shopping. Her son had been asking to see Champion, but she told him no because they were on bad terms and she apparently didn't trust his intentions. When McKinney returned, the dog was gone. And even though she said her son stole Champion, she was shocked to learn that he was capable of abusing him. And while McKinney felt that the beating of her son was excessive, Malone believed that Champion was going to die if someone didn't intervene immediately. However, she was apologetic that the citizen's arrest ended in a brawl. Number 8. Cray Turman. In 2017, 39-year-old Donald Songster Brown allegedly entered a gas station in Columbia, South Carolina, and punched a clerk in the face before threatening her and another customer at knife point. He was also accused of not allowing the victims to leave. Brown eventually exited the store and was approached by Officer Ashley Hardesty, who later described him as acting irate. Hardesty repeatedly told the suspect to stop resisting arrest and to follow her commands, but he didn't listen. She then tried to tackle Brown to the ground, but he pushed her and the two began to wrestle as the officer struggled to gain control of the situation. As a civilian named Cray Turman approached the scene, he saw that Hardesty was still unable to apprehend Brown despite spraying him with mace and tasing him. Turman waited until the opportunity was right, then tackled the suspect himself, allowing Hardesty to finally take him into custody. Police Chief Skip Holbrook presented the Good Samaritan with a certificate acknowledging his heroic deed, along with some gift cards. At the time, Turman was living at a shelter after getting sober. He told local station WSOC that he was glad that this time he wasn't on the other end of the law. Officer Hardesty also expressed her gratitude, and a crowdfunding campaign was set up to help Turman get back on his feet. Number 7. Luke Wadiuk. By the time police in Pueblo, Colorado arrived at the scene of a reported theft in August of 2022, they found the suspect, Nicholas Quintana, handcuffed to a truck. Standing nearby was Luke Wadiuk, who told the officers that as soon as he noticed someone stealing tools at a Home Depot store, he chased after the alleged thief and made a citizen's arrest. The responding officers issued Quintana a ticket to appear at a later court date and released him. They later told local station KRDO that they had to look up the laws revolving around citizens' arrest to determine whether they were required to arrest Wadiuk for detaining Quintana. Speaking to 13 Investigates, Wadiuk said that he wasn't trying to hurt the suspect, but that he felt it was his duty to step in when he saw a crime being committed. He further explained that Pueblo citizens were getting tired of criminals wreaking havoc on the area and getting away with it. Wadiuk was cleared of any wrongdoing, but cautioned fellow citizens against addressing situations the same way he did. He said that because he worked as a car repossessor, he was familiar with how to handle potentially dangerous situations and people. Number 6. Flight Fiasco. 22-year-old Maxwell Berry was accused of robbing a flight attendant's backside with an empty beverage cup during a Frontier Airlines flight from Miami to Philadelphia in 2021. He already had one alcoholic beverage and was asking for another when he made the violating gesture. The flight attendant told Berry not to touch her, but his inappropriate actions continued. A short while later, he spilled his new drink on himself and emerged from the restroom shirtless. Another stewardess helped him get a new shirt out of his carry-on bag, and Berry's behavior became increasingly disruptive throughout the flight. He allegedly groped 2 flight attendants and punched a male crew member who was trying to get him under control. Passengers stepped in and helped as employees wrestled Berry into a seat and duct-taped him to it. He remained uncooperative, screaming for help and yelling that his parents were worth $2 million, at which point crew members taped his mouth shut. Viral footage of the bizarre outburst shows Berry trying to free himself from the improvised restraints. For his actions, he was charged with 3 counts of assault. He initially maintained his innocence on social media, describing the incident as the most dehumanizing experience of his life. But Berry changed his tune toward the end of his trial when he pleaded guilty to all charges. He received a 60-day jail sentence, followed by a year of probation as a result. Number 5. Kevin Holland. MMA fighter Kevin Holland and fellow athlete Patrick Robinson were out for a late dinner in Houston one night in early 2022 when someone fired a shot in the air near the restaurant's bar. Holland and Robinson, along with another customer, immediately rushed over and apprehended the suspect. Thanks to their diligent response, none of the 40 to 50 patrons inside the restaurant at the time were injured. Police arrested the 24-year-old suspect, who reportedly had a warrant for failing to appear in court for a previous charge. This was the second time Holland made news headlines for taking down an accused criminal. Just months earlier, in late 2021, he chased after an alleged carjacker with his vehicle. During the pursuit, Holland called his coach, Chuck Dorsey, and asked for his help catching the suspect. Dorsey later told MMA Junkie that he could hear cars turning corners during the conversation. Once the chase came to an end, Holland ran after the suspect on foot and quickly caught up to him. He tripped the man and then held him down until police arrived. Footage of the encounter shows Holland calmly restraining the accused car thief as a police officer approaches and takes him into custody. Dorsey said that it wasn't unusual for Holland to spring into action in order to help someone in need. Number 4. Nathan Smith. In 2019, residents of a neighborhood in Bristol, England, were terrorized by a string of thefts and break-ins that the police allegedly failed to investigate thoroughly, despite receiving numerous complaints. After noticing a suspected burglary in progress one night, a live-in caregiver named Nathan Smith tackled the serial thief to the ground and held him there for 12 minutes until police arrived. During that time, the suspect, later identified as 43-year-old Craig Wiltshire, pleaded with Smith to ease up on the pressure he was putting on his body. Smith refused, believing that Wiltshire was pretending to be in distress so he could gain an opportunity to escape. By the time police arrived, the thief was unconscious. Police body cam footage showed Smith telling officers that Wiltshire had spit, spat at, and tried kicking him during the citizen's arrest. Wiltshire died 2 weeks later in the hospital, prompting allegations that Smith acted out of anger and was trying to physically punish the man for his alleged crimes. Authorities charged Smith with manslaughter. At his trial, he claimed he was unaware that Wiltshire had a pre-existing heart condition, which made him especially vulnerable to the effects of being held down. Smith also argued that he didn't realize the position he held Wiltshire in could be fatal to a person after a prolonged period of time. A medical examiner ruled that Wiltshire's death resulted from cardiac arrest and brain damage. During Smith's trial, restraint technique expert Jason Payne James testified that he believed the defendant used reasonable force. He explained that considering the level of knowledge that Smith could be expected to have as a person who's not trained in subduing suspects, he acted accordingly. A jury acquitted Smith in what Detective Superintendent James Riccio described as a sensitive and complicated case. Although the citizen's arrest was deemed legal, Riccio urged civilians to contact the police and let them handle suspected thefts whenever possible. Number 3. Eric Barksdale. During the summer of 2022, thefts of Kia and Hyundai vehicles in the US nearly tripled thanks to a group of thieves who called themselves the Kia Boys. These criminals are known to make TikTok videos teaching people how to start certain models of cars with a USB cord. The trend seems to have originated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, before spreading to other parts of the country. While driving in Milwaukee one day in June, right as the theft started soaring to concerning levels, Eric Barksdale crashed into a Kia going the wrong direction on a one-way street. After hitting Barksdale's vehicle head-on and colliding with a truck, a group of teenagers ditched the car and fled the scene on foot. However, one injured young man involved in the crime didn't get very far. Barksdale later explained to local station WISN that the teen was clearly in no position to run. He told the suspect to lie down and wait for help to arrive, as he instructed another bystander to hold him in place. Police soon showed up and arrested the young man. During his interview with WISN, Barksdale said that he always told himself he'd never have a run-in with the Kia Boys, but that the collision was unavoidable. He also shared his thoughts about how the criminals don't understand the potential consequences of their risky behavior. Now that Barksdale's been victimized, he wants to be a part of slowing down the dangerous trend. Number 2. MMA fighters pursue thief. More than a dozen MMA fighters were working out at a gym in Perth, Australia in April of 2022 when one of them got an alert on his phone that someone had used his debit card at a nearby store. Realizing that a thief had broken into his car and took his belongings, the victim and his fellow athlete set out in pursuit of the suspect. They stopped at the store where the debit card was used and got a description of the suspect from an employee before continuing their search. By the time the men caught up with the alleged thief, about 20 minutes later, he was wearing a pair of brand new shoes. One of the men who participated in the chase, Romel Luistro, told Today that the suspect was threatening to beat them up. However, he was clearly no match against 15 trained MMA fighters who held him in place until police arrived. Luistro credited the athlete's training with their ability to detain the man without hurting him. He pointed out that this is just one of the real-life benefits that comes with their chosen sport. The suspect of the crime was taken into custody and is currently waiting for his next court date. Number 1. Civilians versus cell phone thief. As a masked man dressed in all black ran through the streets of London one day in 2022, civilians heard someone yell, "Trip him up." A quick-thinking bystander followed the command and swiftly took down the suspected phone thief in what's been described as a huge rugby tackle. As the two men struggled on the pavement, a middle-aged woman came over and put the suspect in a chokehold to prevent him from getting away. In the meantime, another witness attempted to calm the thief down while a curious crowd gathered around them, and people began to ask what was going on. The victim got their stolen phone back, and by the time police arrived, the suspect and the man who had tackled him were gone. No arrests were made, and according to their most recent update, the police were still investigating the incident.
8. Blue Hills eruption. In 1980, a news station participated in an April Fool's Day prank, leading to mass hysteria and panic in the streets of Boston. WNAC-TV Channel 7 reporter Jim Harrison thought it would be hilarious to prank his entire audience. So in order to do this, he gathered real footage from Mount St. Helens volcanic eruption and clips from a frightened and concerned President Jimmy Carter, then edited them together to create a video he would later play live on the air. He reported to his viewers that the Blue Hills in Milton were erupting. Keep in mind that Mount St. Helens had just erupted for real only 5 days before the broadcast. So it's understandable that everyone was pretty freaked out. The newscast aired on April 1st, 1980, and the public was reasonably concerned by his claims. In response, many people took to the streets in a panic, while others began to flood the local police department and the Massachusetts Civil Defense with phone calls. However, if they would have just stuck around for the entirety of the report, they would have seen Harrison holding up a sign that read, "April Fools." In the end, the prank news story didn't go over all that well with the station's audience or the news station executives. The day after the Blue Hills eruption story aired, Homer Killey, the executive producer for the 6 o'clock news, was fired from his position for failing to exercise good news judgment and for violating the rules of Federal Communications Commission. 7. Ebola zombies. In 2013, the famous Ebola virus made international headlines when a story was released claiming that the deceased victims were rising from the dead. An article was published on a satirical website claiming that 3 victims who had passed away from the virus had risen from the grave as zombies. The story was posted on a site called Big America News, which claims to report on loudly yelled opinions, as well as facts proudly born of raw gut instinct. However, some readers didn't seem to understand that the claims were fake, and a lot of people started to fear that a zombie takeover was imminent. The images that were used in the article were doctored photographs from the movie World War Z, which is an apocalyptic movie about the undead. The story started in Liberia and appeared in 2 African news outlets, but the claims were never confirmed by the government, which definitely would have released a statement if the hoax had been real. And while a zombie apocalypse sounds terrifying, it most likely won't happen anytime in the near future. 6. Jasmine Shevil. In September 2014, a woman from Florida was reported to have undergone plastic surgery in order to add a 3rd breast to her chest. The story made news headlines due to its ridiculousness and went on to trick hundreds of thousands of people. Jasmine Shevil is the name of the alleged woman from the various articles that were published following the story. The outlandish claims sparked interest with the public. There were even images of the woman and her 3 breasts circulating all over the internet. However, many people took this story as fact at face value and failed to do any further research into the narrative themselves. Media outlets began to run the story about Miss Shevil without confirming the details. And in the beginning, nobody attempted to get third-party photographs of the woman. The doctor who supposedly completed the cosmetic surgery was never interviewed, and there was no research into the background of this woman, who could have easily been using a fake name. There were a lot of online tabloids that published the story just so they could gain new readers, and most likely didn't even care if it was real or not. Miss Shevil began to make claims online that she had booked various talk shows to speak about her surgery, even stating she would make an appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live. But the woman never ended up being interviewed on TV. Instead, she began promoting a self-produced reality show starring herself. However, that never aired either, and her credibility was soon called into question. Images of a woman named Alicia Hessler began to circulate online, and people noticed that she bore a striking resemblance to Jasmine Shevil. The photos were taken from an online modeling page, and there was a website called JasmineShevil.com that was discovered to be owned by someone named Alicia Hessler. Apparently, there was also a Tampa-based massage therapist by the name Alicia Jasmine Hessler, who looked eerily similar to the three-breasted woman herself. Then, on March 14, 2013, Alicia Jasmine Hessler was taken into custody and charged with fraudulent use of personal information in Hillsborough County, Florida. Local Tampa station WTSP even reported that Miss Hessler had visited the Tampa International Airport and filed a stolen baggage complaint that had 3 breast prostheses listed among the lost items. After this incriminating information was released to the public, Jasmine Tridevil refused to comment on the matter, only further proving that the whole thing was a hoax to begin with. 5. PanAm Flight 914. The mysterious story of PanAm Flight 914 has become the subject of many conspiracy websites and UFO blogs over the decades. The plane supposedly took off in 1955 from New York and was reported to have vanished into thin air with 57 passengers on board. Then, as if nothing had happened, Flight 914 reappeared 37 years later and landed in Miami. It seems impossible, right? Well, that's because it is. The whole story was a hoax fabricated by a notorious tabloid called Weekly World News. The writers who created this work of fiction published an article 3 decades after the alleged Flight 914 had disappeared. They made it seem as though they were following up on a news story from years before. But in reality, everything they reported was a lie. The tabloid was infamous for publishing fantastically unreal stories, which is why they were eventually shut down in 2007. However, at the time this article was published, many readers believed it to be true. People began to come up with theories to explain the miraculous disappearing and reappearing act, many of which involved either some sort of time travel portal or extraterrestrial interference. The story is still believed by some conspiracy theorists to this day. And in June of 2019, a YouTube video from the channel Brightside renewed interest in this hoax when they posted a 9-minute video on the subject. For the first 7 minutes of the viral video, which amassed roughly 5 million views, it delves into the mystery surrounding PanAm Flight 914. The video does eventually get around to the possibility that the entire story is a work of fiction, but most of the viewers didn't seem to get that far into it. 4. Cannibal Elites and Adrenochrome. In 2020, there was a live stream that went viral featuring Kirsten Weldon, a QAnon conspiracy theorist and former actress. She claimed that Hillary Clinton had passed away the year before from a rare brain disease that's associated with cannibalism. The story seems far-fetched, but many viewers believed Weldon, as she seemed to have a lot of information regarding the incident. While being interviewed on the Up Front in the Prophetic podcast, the host, Francine Fosdick, mentioned that Jean Decode Consensei, another well-known conspiracy theorist, had claimed that Hillary Clinton had been eliminated long ago. Weldon supported Consensei's notion and agreed that the former Secretary of State was dead, but offered up her own ideas about the manner of death and the timing the incident took place. Weldon explained that Clinton had passed away from a disease called Kuru and said that she was already stage 4 and couldn't be helped. However, the bizarre claim was shocking to say the least, given the fact that the last known case of the disease was among a group of cannibals from Papua New Guinea. The QAnon conspiracy that went viral also proposed that Clinton and other well-known leaders in the government participate in satanic rituals that involve literally devouring children in order to gain vitality. According to Weldon, by harvesting adrenochrome from their victims, which is a chemical compound that's produced by the oxidation of adrenaline, Hollywood elites and liberal politicians could use its benefits to extend their own lives. There are also other QAnon conspiracy theorists that claim Clinton and Huma Abedin, her chief of staff and former aide, were captured on video tearing off a victim's face, wearing it as a mask, and then drinking their blood to obtain the adrenochrome. However, no such video has ever surfaced online. Liz Crokin is an American columnist and conspiracy theorist who stands behind these outlandish claims. She's been featured in a video stating that elites love adrenochrome, which is derived from the pituitary gland of children. She even says the chemical compound is sold frequently on the black market and that it's the favorite drug of the upper class. 3. End of the world. An article was posted on CNN's iReport News Hub in 2014, claiming that a massive asteroid was on a direct collision course with Earth. Even though the story was not produced by the news channel themselves, many readers who found the article took it as fact. The person who posted the piece was only identified as Marcus575, but he insisted in his writings that NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory had detected an object the size of Manhattan that was headed right for the planet. He claimed the asteroid was 10 miles, 16 kilometers wide, and was discovered to be around 51 million miles, 82,076,544 kilometers from Earth. However, in the article's second paragraph, it said that the impact was set to take place on March 35th, 2041. Regardless of when it was slated to happen, various publications linked onto the story and caused widespread panic by claiming the world was coming to an end. The story stayed up on CNN for a whopping 22 hours before it was finally removed. The news channel quickly came out with a statement saying that NASA had confirmed via email that the story was false and that the biggest object that had been detected in space was only 1.8 miles, 3 kilometers wide, and posed no threat to the planet. While the whole thing was just a hoax created by a man most likely seeking fame from the incident, many people actually believed the world was about to be destroyed. Even though the story was refuted not even a day after it was posted, some still think that it was covered up in order to keep the population in blissful ignorance. 2. Martian Invasion. On October 30th, 1938, the CBS radio network aired a special Halloween episode of their series, The Mercury Theater on the Air, which falsely claimed that a Martian invasion was happening. Even though the program didn't have a massive audience, it still caused panic among the listeners. The broadcast started out normally with an introductory monologue, but then the host, Orson Welles, claimed that the show was being interrupted because of breaking news. He stated that there were strange explosions being documented on Mars, and that an unidentified object was discovered after falling on a New Jersey farm. The broadcast prank then escalated when Wells claimed a reporter in Grover's Mill was live on the scene at a UFO crash site. He described creatures emerging from the spaceship, and that when officials approached them with a truce flag, the aliens responded by incinerating them with an alleged heat ray. Wells then goes on to explain that an alien invasion has begun, and that the military's attempts to stop the threat have been unsuccessful. It turned out that the whole broadcast was an adaptation of the 1898 film, The War of the Worlds, but it was the first time anything like this was done on the radio. However, before the show began, there was a musical interlude explaining that it was just a work of science fiction. But a lot of the listeners apparently missed that. 1. Santiago Flight 513. On September 4th, 1954, Santiago Flight 513 supposedly took off from Aachen, West Germany, and should have landed in Porto Alegre the next day, but mysteriously it never made it to its destination. To make things even stranger, 3.5 decades later, the Porto Alegre airport allegedly noticed an unauthorized aircraft hovering in the sky on October 12, 1989. Air traffic controllers tried to contact the pilot, but were unable to reach him. After a while, the plane was reported to have stuck a perfect landing with the engines still up and running after it touched the ground. Inside the fully functioning aircraft, they supposedly found the 92 skeletons of the passengers on board. Miguel Victor Curie, the captain, was also nothing but bone, and he had his hands still tightly gripped around the controls. However, officials and eyewitnesses to the event refused to comment on the sudden reappearance of Flight 513, and nobody could confirm what had happened. Dr. Kelso Otello, a paranormal researcher, said that the only plausible explanation for this event is that the Santiago Flight had entered a time warp. But if this were true, how could the pilot land the plane if he was found as a skeleton? At the time the news story broke, Santiago Airlines had been out of business since 1956, and living executives that used to work there were unable to comment on the incident. Various government officials and agencies were said to have investigated this strange occurrence, but they refused to disclose the information they found. The government also did not comment on the claims from Dr. Otello or whether or not they thought a time warp was involved. This is because the story of Santiago Flight 513 is widely considered to be nothing but a tabloid hoax. There are no details regarding the sudden reappearance of the plane that can be confirmed, and many people believe that the story was created as a fictional story. It was first published by the Weekly World News, who was known to bend the truth in order to make a profit, and this article was released just 4 years after the tabloid published the story about PanAm Flight 914 that disappeared and reappeared after 37 years. Have you ever fallen for a fake news story? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.